Imagine for a second that somewhere in the world, a single button gets pushed. It's a decision that takes, what, a few seconds to make? But the consequences, well, they could spiral out for generations. Today, we're going to walk through a really critical thought experiment. What is the true cascading cost of just one nuclear strike in our modern world?
So let's just ask the question straight up. What would actually happen if a single nuke was used today? It's a terrifying thought, for sure, but really understanding the potential consequences, both the literal and the metaphorical fallout, is probably more important now than ever.
The immediate effect is almost impossible to wrap your head around. 10 seconds. That's it. That's all it would take to completely wipe a city off the map. But that initial horrifying blast, that's just the first domino. The chain reaction that comes next is what threatens the entire planet.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. We're at ground zero in those first few terrifying seconds right after the detonation.
A nuclear explosion is basically a three-part catastrophe that happens in the blink of an eye. First, there's the flash, a light so incredibly bright it can cause blindness miles away while it instantly vaporizes everything at the center. Right behind it comes the shockwave. This is a literal wall of force that just flattens buildings like they're made of cardboard. And then, finally, the fireball ignites whatever the shockwave didn't obliterate, creating this massive, self-sustaining firestorm that can just burn for hours. But the danger that lasts the longest? It's not something you can see. After the blast, after the fire, a silent, invisible poison starts to spread. And yeah, we're talking about nuclear fallout. This is all that radioactive material from the bomb just pulverized and shot way up into the atmosphere. This lethal dust, it doesn't just vanish. It travels on the wind, and then eventually it falls back down to Earth, sometimes hundreds of miles away, and it contaminates absolutely everything it lands on. So the devastation just keeps going, long after the explosion is over. Fallout poisons the very things we need to survive. Water supplies become toxic, farmland gets contaminated, which means massive food shortages, and for anyone who actually survives the initial blast, the radiation exposure leads to all kinds of severe, long-term health problems. What you're left with is a huge area that's just completely uninhabitable for years, maybe even decades. And this is the moment where a regional catastrophe starts to become a full-blown global crisis. See, a nuclear attack doesn't happen in a vacuum. It kicks off a political chain reaction that's almost impossible to stop. The first domino to fall after the bomb itself, retaliation. You can bet it would be immediate and it would almost certainly be overwhelming. So now, this isn't a single event anymore. It's the first shot fired in a regional war that has just gone nuclear.
The speed of how this all escalates is what's really terrifying. Within just 1 hour, retaliatory strikes are already in the air. Within a day, the whole conflict is pulling in neighboring countries. And by the 48-hour mark, the big global superpowers are activating their alliances. They're mobilizing their forces. In just 2 days, we would go from a single strike to the entire world teetering on the brink of total nuclear war.
And beyond the battlefield, the shockwaves would hit every single person on this planet through a completely different kind of war, an economic one. Think about it. A major nuclear conflict would instantly disrupt the world's most vital resources. Oil supplies would get choked off, causing prices to just skyrocket practically overnight. The cost of transportation, of manufacturing, of food, basically the cost of living, it would just explode.
The scale of the financial collapse would be just staggering. We're talking trillions of dollars just vanishing from the global economy, almost instantly. Stock markets would crash, global trade would grind to a dead stop, and the world would be thrown into a depression that would make every other economic crisis in history look tiny.
And all of this, it brings us to the final, really sobering conclusion about what this kind of conflict actually is. It all boils down to one single, inescapable truth. When you trace that whole chain reaction, from the blast to the fallout, from the retaliation to the global economic collapse, the conclusion is pretty clear. There are no winners in a nuclear war. One single decision puts millions of lives on the line and gambles with the entire future of civilization. Which of course leaves us with the most important question of all. It's the one we started with, but now we can feel the full weight of the consequences behind it. When you look at the total global cost, is any conflict, is any political goal really worth this kind of risk?